Now this is the Nike Strike as used in the Premier League. It has come back for a new bladder, but the material they make the ball out of is very, very light. So for some unknown reason, these Pakistanis who make these balls for the Premier League, what they've had to do is compensate with the weight of the bladder, because a football has got to weigh between 14 and 16 ounces. So what they've done, they've got an ordinary football bladder and they've put patches of cotton. They've stuck patches of cotton all around the bladder, as you can see there. I hope you can see. Little patches of cotton, just to compensate for the weight. So they've glued an ordinary football bladder all the way around, cut pieces of cotton and just stuck it on like a patchwork quilt, just so that it brings the weight up to 14 to 16 ounces. So what we have to do now is we take an ordinary football bladder, which is there, and obviously that's deflated, that's before it's inflated, and we've got to compensate for the weight. Now, as I said before, this material they've made the Nike Strike out is very, very light. So they've actually put cotton on the inside. I'll just zoom in so you can possibly see. You can see where the thickness of the cotton compared to the thickness of the material they've made, the PVC or whatever it is they've made it out of, that's very, very thin. So they've put an actual cotton backing on the inside of the football, but even that didn't bring it up to the correct weight, which is 14 to 16 ounces, as you probably know. So what we have to do now is do exactly what the same as the Indians or the Pakistanis have done, and we get an ordinary football bladder, which is what we insert. Now a football bladder, that's 65 gram in weight. They're all the same. So the machines that actually make these football bladders cost thousands, probably £100,000 each, and they're set at that tolerance of 65 grams, so that can't be altered. So what they've had to do is put this patchwork quilt on the actual bladder. So they've glued all around the bladder and then put pieces of cotton onto the bladder itself, just to bring the weight up to the 14 to 16 ounces required by law. So what we have to do, we have to get our bladders and do exactly the same thing before we insert it into the ball. So we've got the bladder. So what I would suggest you do, I've actually tried the cotton, sticking the cotton on, which is pretty difficult. So what I've done, I've got proper duct tape from a plumber's merchants, not the cheap stuff from the pound shops, which sticks perfectly. That's just a quick sample I've done. So what we have to do, we'll inflate this bladder to its correct size, and then what we have to do is put patches of this duct tape all the way around it, exactly the same as they've done with the cotton. So if you do that, put that duct tape all the way around, stick it, and it sticks perfectly. So when it gets inflated or deflated, it won't come off, which will bring it up to the correct weight. Ridiculous really to say this is a Premier League football, probably costing about £100 each, probably more. It's just a Mickey Mouse operation to me, but unfortunately that's what they've done. So we have to compensate and do exactly the same thing if we have to put a new bladder in, if the ball punches. So basically, as I said before, if a ball comes in, a Nike Strike comes in, or any other football which is made the same way by putting patchwork quilt onto the actual bladder itself, I can't believe what they've done. It's just an amateur way. Now there's a piece of cloth, you can probably see it sticking up. I'll try and zoom in. There's a piece of cloth that's stuck, it's just stuck down with ordinary glue. So, as I said, I can hold the bladder up with it. That's ridiculous. I don't realise that. I don't think the Premier League and the Championship realise what they've done with these footballs. But unfortunately they have, and they've probably got a contract with the Football League and the Premier League to supply them. So if a ball punches and it comes in, that's what you'll have to do. Just ordinary duct tape. That's the best way. I've tried one or two things. I've tried putting the cloth on, and it is a little bit sticky and messy. Having to glue the ball and then stick pieces of cotton onto it, or linen. So this duct tape from a proper plumber's merchants, it probably costs you about £3 or £4 a roll, but obviously you get plenty on a roll. And just do patchwork quilt all around the bladder once you've inflated it. And once it's done, just deflate the bladder, and then you can insert it inside the football. So that should be of help in case any ball arrives and you see a bladder inside, which is similar. Thank you. Right, I've put plenty of duct tape all around the bladder. Obviously I inflated it first, so make it easy to stick on. And now I've deflated it. Now as you can see with the duct tape, it's all wrinkled. But don't worry about that, because once it's inflated, it will go back level again. Now the original bladder, that's exactly the same. If you deflate it, all the cloth inside or on the top is wrinkled. As you can see there, it's all wrinkled, but as I say, once it's inflated, it will go to its correct shape. Now I've glued the top of the bladder, as you can see there. I'm just waiting for it to get tacky, and then I'll put it into the football. And before I stitch the ball up, I will inflate it and just show you exactly how it will look. Right, I've now inserted the bladder, the wrinkly one as you saw, inside the football. I'm just putting it on test now. As you can see, it's perfectly round. I've weighed it. It's exactly 15¼ ounces, which is spot on. Anything between 14 to 16 ounces. As you can see there, the bladder's sticking up now. It was a white bladder, it is now a silver one, because of all the messing about we've had to do. Altogether it's taken me about 10 minutes, so it's not too much problem. What I would suggest is, once you've put the tape on it, put plenty of tape all the way around to bring it up to the correct weight. You can judge that yourself. But it's pretty difficult to get the bladder to stick in the ball with only if you've only opened it on 3 edges. So what I would suggest is, because the bladder is a lot stiffer with all the tape on and all wrinkly, is to open another edge, so you've got 4 sides opened. That way it's a lot easier to inflate the bladder once you've got it in, and also to stick the bladder inside the ball. So I've opened it 1, 2, 3, as you can see, 4 edges there, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. That way the bladder goes in a lot easier, and it just means stitching another panel up, another side panel up, which is no problem. So I'll leave that on test now. Make sure there's no more thorns in. I know there's not, but I'll leave it on test for at least an hour, because this ball is going back to Portsmouth. So we'll see how it goes. So as I say, if you have any problems with one of these Nike balls that have got patches on the bladder and you can't repair the bladder and you have to replace it, just stick duct tape, proper duct tape, the proper one from the plumber's merchants, all the way around it. As I say, it is a little bit wrinkly and a little bit messy to get the bladder to stick inside the ball once you've done it. But if you open another panel, a side panel, then you'll have no problems. As you can see, I've just done that. So best of luck, and let's hope you don't get any of these stupid Nike balls sent in to you. Thank you. Now there we have the Nike Strike finished off, ready for the next match. Now, as I said before, the material they used to make this ball is very, very thin, extremely thin. It's okay for the Premier League, who play in an enclosed stadium and every ball is only used once. It's only used in one match, and then it's passed on to the juniors and the reserves, the A team, etc. But as regards the amateur clubs, with the outer casing being very, very thin, and thorns are everywhere for the amateurs, the thorns only have to look at this ball and they will enter it, because there's nothing to stop it. It's only paper thin, the outer coating. In fact, it's only as thick as a coat of paint. So it's a very good ball, don't get me wrong, but in my opinion it's not sufficiently good enough for the amateurs, because they will have problems. As I say, it only has to go anywhere near a hawthorn bush and it will puncture. So my advice to the amateurs is don't waste a lot of money on a so-called top quality ball that actually isn't a top quality ball. It's only got very, very, very thin cotton stitching, which is machine stitched, and once it's been played with probably a dozen times, the stitching will start to burst. And as I said before, with the outer coating being very, very thin, it's susceptible to thorns. But as a ball for a Premier League, I can't find fault with it. It'd be sufficient for at least 1 or 2 games. That is my opinion.